My name's TCaptainX, and today we've got a huge update for Warzone 2 with the Season 1 Reloaded update. And there's a lot of changes, a lot of bug fixes, and a few things that were not mentioned in the patch notes that are in the game as of now. So I'm going to quickly go through the patch notes with you guys and talk about a few extra things that I noticed myself while I was playing the game. So first, they did add this like Rocket League-esque game mode where you're basically playing soccer with ATVs, you know. Hooray for those who want to play that. A few things here. They did finally fix the XP tokens where it actually will show a timer on screen of how much time you have left. So that's a nice change. There should not be a bug anymore where it would just like deplete all of your XP tokens. That was very frustrating for people that did have to experience that. They did clean up the UI a bit. Not a massive change. I think the UI still needs work, but it is a little bit easier to navigate in your friends list and invite your friends. A few other small changes here with like voice chat, things like that. They did add groups. So groups are basically like regiments or clans. This is a good way, you know, this is how we used to do like our custom private matches in Warzone 1, although custom matches are still not a thing yet. So we'll see, you know, if that becomes more and whatnot. There is a new weapon, the Chimera. I use this a little bit as groundly in Warzone 2. It's very similar to the Bass P. I think it's the same family. Seems like a close range, maybe sniper support type AR. Don't think it's going to be necessarily a long range meta, but I haven't got to test it and I don't have it fully leveled up, so we will have to see. Now, there was a huge nerf finally to the Akimbo pistols. These have been incredibly dominant, and in close range, these things were just absolutely broken with how fast they could kill you. They did say there is a damage reduction. I'm not sure exactly how much that is. They did not give us fine numbers like they used to in Warzone 1, which is frustrating that we're, you know, getting less of what we are used to having, but hey, it is what it is. A few other nerfs. Got a nerf to the cast off 74U at close range. This was one of the most dominant close and mid-range guns in the game, so I think this was somewhat needed. M13 had an adjustment to one of its attachments, not a big deal there. Cast off 545, the AR variant, did get a buff overall to close damage and the chest damage multiplier. So this actually, I think this was actually an underrated gun before. This actually might sneak into kind of a mid to long range meta. MX9 get a little bit of a buff. I think this thing is more of a solos gun because that 32 round mag is its largest attachment, so kind of tough to use in trios and quads. The Vel or the MP7 also got a little bit of a buff. They mostly increases movement speed and then longer damage at range, so it might be a good sniper support, to be honest. A few adjustments to the Basilisk, which is like the Magnum handgun. Also relatively a buff to the Deagles. Not a super popular gun, but we'll see how much of a changes those make. This one is one I am very glad to see, is shotguns will no longer one-shot a fully armored player. This was incredibly frustrating to happen. So shotguns damage has been nerfed, it appears, at close range at least. Few other changes to some of the this expedite shotgun. Riot shields actually caught a pretty big nerf, which personally I'm glad I don't use riot shields, but for those who did, that would be frustrating for those melee players. Small adjustment to the Joker, nothing big there. Now, one thing I was really hoping for in this update was that there would be a nerf to the heavy chopper meta. A lot of people are getting this heavy chopper and they're just staying alive to the end game. But if anything, they buffed it. They actually reduced the collision damage it takes. So I'm a little frustrated with that. We shall see. I think that is definitely still a part of the meta if your goal is to purely win games. This one I didn't get to necessarily test, but this will be very nice. If your teammate walks in front of you, between you and an enemy, their nameplate should now disappear to allow better visibility on the enemy. This happened to be several times where your teammate walks in front and you see that nameplate, you're like, oh, it's my teammate, and in fact it is the enemy. So that should no longer happen. Now, this whole section here, very confusing. This is all multiplayer related. However, these patch notes are from Ravensoft, who Raven Software are the ones who are responsible for Warzone. Infinity Ward is responsible for multiplayer. So I have no idea why they are talking about this here, but there are some multiplayer adjustments to some of the kill streaks there. Portable radars can now stick to vehicles, which I think is actually a nice change. Portable radars give you a very small UAV. It's a field upgrade, so you can now throw that on a vehicle, drive around, and you might find some people like sitting in a building if you're driving next to a building. Radiation blocker, which is a DMZ thing. They adjusted how that is. A little bit of a nerf to thermite grenades. They're not going to persist. They should like kind of fade away, basically. Tuning got buffed, it seems like. So essentially what they're saying here is that your tuning increases should increase more, and then how much it would harm when you would tune shouldn't harm it as much. So essentially it's going to be more important now to get those guns max level and to actually tune them now. They did buff thermal optics, or making the thermal like range be a little bit longer, and then it also will be when you kill an enemy, you're no longer going to see that heat signature, so it's less distracting. few other adjustments to some of these optics, nothing big here. I don't think any of these optics were super popular. A few bug fixes here, but there is a whole other list of bug fixes coming. I'm not sure why there's some here and then more later. Like a lot of these changes should be for Warzone, but then there's a Warzone section down here, so it's kind of confusing. Now, audio. I was really hoping for audio to have major rework because I've been very frustrated with the lack of footsteps in this game. I did play solos, and in solos, I felt like the audio was working fine, but the big issue with this game typically when it comes to audio is when there's lots of noises going on, the footsteps get completely drowned out. So we will have to see. I don't think there really is a major change to the actual footstep audio in the game, unfortunately. As far as playlist goes, we got a pretty standard playlist of solos, duos, quads. Trios is going to be Mini Royale. This is not Resurgence. Mini Royale is still Battle Royale, but it's like sped up. It's like starting the game kind of midway through with a much smaller player pool. I think this actually will be a really fun game mode because sometimes the mid game of normal BR can feel very slow, especially if you're someone who is used to playing Resurgence and not traditional Battle Royale. And then that Warzone Cup is basically that Rocket League-esque mode. DMZ sounds like it's relatively staying the same. I am not a DMZ expert, but they did add a new area, which sounds like it is separate from Al Mazrah. You need a key to go to this completely separate area. Funny how they called it Biological Laboratory. That sounds like a complete ripoff from Tarkov, but hey, what do I know? Now, this change is something that I am very excited about, and I did test this and can confirm this, that they increase the number of strongholds from 3 to 5. And strongholds, for the most part, are by far the easiest way to get your loadout, especially in the early game, because these spawn basically once the first circle starts to close. So now you should theoretically have a stronghold somewhat near you. You can grab a vehicle, go to that stronghold. And they also significantly nerfed how strong the AI bots are there. They reduce the damage they do, they reduce the number of units, and also decrease how often they respawn. So this is a very good change. I did a few strongholds in solos. They were very easy to go through, and I even were able to hit them after other people completed them. So just keep a mental note of where those strongholds are during that game, because even if that icon goes away, you can go back, get your loadout, and that is, I think, extremely important right now in this game. A few adjustments to DMZ. I'm not going to cover this as I am not a DMZ expert, but that is available here if you are interested. Bomb drones should be back in the game. Bomb drones were taken out actually because of an issue. It seems like they have nerfed their damage, but it says it will players with 3 armor plates on an outer radius of an explosion will survive. So I think that means if they are point blank to you, it will still one-shot down you, which is frustrating, but hopefully they're a little bit more visible. Hopefully we can shoot them down a little bit easier than before. Perk packages. Now this one is very interesting, and this is something that they did not really go into detail, but I was able to test. The ultimate perk, the 4th perk that you have, was not working in any loadouts except unless you went over to the default tab. Well, they changed the default tab and they got rid of the Bird's Eye perk. Bird's Eye, if you guys knew, was one of the most broken perks. It basically theoretically gave you a constant UAV, and they just got rid of it. So the only options there were like Overclock, Ghost, and High Alert. I think High Alert's still a really good option. Ghost, of course, if it works, but we don't know if Ghost really works as intended or not. But the ultimate perk in normal custom loadouts is not working, and you cannot customize your perks. You have to select one of the pre-selected perk sets. And they did address, and they said, not in the patch notes here, but they said it another time recently, that it is not intended for you to customize your perks. It is intended you have to use the preset perk packages. So I think they maybe need to do a lot of balancing with the perks before they roll out those custom packages, but we shall see. A few quality of life changes here, and the biggest one here is going to be the ground loot. I did test this. Overall, looting is easier. Before, you had to look at an item just perfectly in order to loot it. It definitely seems a lot easier to actually, if you look at it, it gives you an option to loot it, and it's not as much of a struggle. However, I will say there was an instance when I was playing that I killed someone in a bathroom, very small area, and all of his loot piled up, and it was very difficult, and I could not find that player's pack and open it up. So it's not perfect, but definitely a lot better. One thing that was interesting as well, and I don't know if this was mentioned in here, is they adjusted the number of buy stations. They used to be, there were always buy stations at every area. they're not there anymore. So that's kind of frustrating. And they also slightly moved some of the locations of them. If anything, I think they should have increased buy stations, but there seems to be less, if anything. Another thing that is really nice here is that when a player revives, there's going to be a sound like there was in Warzone 1. I don't know how loud that sound is. I didn't get to hear it, but you should hear like a ding or like that zoom kind of sound, so you know someone is self-reviving. There also is going to be an audio alert when your teammate goes down in the gulag, or an enemy, because before it was hard to tell if one of your teammates or the enemies went down. Combat records are still not available. So your KD, your number of wins, still not available, which I think is insane, I guess, that this is still not available this late into the game. And from what we know, your KD and stats and wins are not tracking. So that will not start tracking until once they implement leaderboard, which is very interesting. Now, there is absolutely a massive list of bug fixes, and I'm just going to cover a few of the big ones that I noticed myself. You should be able to see nameplates when you're spectating your teammates. This was confusing because often your teammates wouldn't have nameplates, so it looked like an enemy when you're spectating. They did increase the bomb drone beep, so it should be a little bit easier to hear. So this is an interesting one where they said that they fixed an issue where you couldn't ping a loadout drop. So I don't know if this is intended or not, but when someone interacts with a loadout, that icon is gone forever like it was before. To me, that doesn't make sense. I feel like that loadout icon should stay the same for the rest of the game, and that way everyone knows where it is. But you still need to actually go ping next to a loadout so you have an idea of where they are. I find that a little bit frustrating, but I guess that is what they intended to do. For people that run the resupply perk, it's supposed to have a bar now that shows it kind of refilling. That was not there before. Supposedly they did also clean up the kill feed. There were a lot of times where like your teammates would get a kill and you would not know because it would not show in the kill feed. So this is supposed to be fixed. There was a method that you could get like maximum cash by like a bug with interacting with loot. Supposedly they nerfed that and you can no longer do that anymore. If you're using the akimbos and you pulled your parachute, sometimes there was a bug where your guy's character would be like all over the place with his gun. So supposedly they fix that here. One other bug that I realized they did not fix is that when you down someone out of the air and they go to that down state and fall, they do not die from fall damage. So they can literally land on their butt from like 100 meters up in the air and they don't die. So that is kind of frustrating and surprising that they still did not address that. A lot of other DMZ fixes here that I will not go through, but you are able to read if you're interested. And that is it. So to confirm, there was no nerf to the RPK, no TTK changes, no weapon pings, none of that. It was mostly just a lot of bug fixes, but really no major changes to the actual gameplay. So I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts with this. Personally, there are several more changes I would like to see. Number one being audio, a little bit longer TTK in my preference as well, but curious to hear your guys' opinions. If this helped, consider subscribing for more content. Thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next one.